Hi everybody, it's Anne-Marie again, and this is, gosh, I think this is the 10th video that I've done in this series. We've kind of moved from the fermented cod liver oil scandal to the Weston A. Price Foundation sexual harassment scandal. In the process of researching what was going on with the fermented cod liver oil after Dr. Kaayla Daniel, who we have here today. Sorry, I should introduce you first. Dr. Kaayla Daniel, welcome.
Thank you.
We have Kaayla here today to talk again. We did a video before about the report, the whistleblower report that Kaayla put out in August 2015 about the green pasture fermented cod liver oil. Now, in the process of putting this information out there and researching all of this, I just kept finding more and more reports. People were emailing me, texting me, doing Skype calls, which they didn't, the calls I did were not recorded. But yeah, I talked to a lot of different women who had reports of sexual harassment. And I was like, wow, that's interesting, because I myself had gone through this, which I talked about in my last video with Annie Drew, who also experienced sexual harassment. The sexual harassment we're referring to is perpetrated by Jeffrey Morrell, who is the co-founder, right? He is actually the co-founder of the Weston Price Foundation.
I think Mary Enig was.
Okay, well, it says on their farm site, I looked it up, but I don't know if it's true or not, but on Sally Fallon's, Morrell's
was certainly a founding member.
Founding member. Board director, and he just stepped down last week, but he's been a board director the whole time, right?
Yes.
The whole time that the organization's been out there. So Jeffrey Morrell is also the husband of Sally Fallon Morrell, and I just kept hearing report after report after report. So that's why I ended up interviewing Annie Drew last week, and now Kaayla has decided to come and talk to us about this and her knowledge about the sexual harassment. Kaayla, how long were you with the Weston Price Foundation until you were let go after your report came out in August, so you were let go in September this year? How long were you with them before that?
I was involved right from the get-go, first as a writer for Wise Traditions and later as an honorary board member, then a full board member, and then I succeeded Mary Enig, Dr. Mary Enig, as vice president of the foundation. And then I issued a whistleblower report on the dangers of fermented cod liver oil, and I was removed from the board, and that occurred September 20th.
Okay. So you've been with them from the beginning, and so you know a lot about what we're talking about, and that's what you're going to share today. Let me ask you first, and it's going to be, this is not an easy conversation, and I am going to probably disable comments on the YouTube for this, because there have just been unbelievable nasty comments attacking the women who have come forward. So far, just me and Annie Drew, but there are other women out there who have reported to me and either haven't wanted to come forward or, almost all of them just don't want to come forward. And I understand that. It's not easy to put yourself out there and to have this conversation. So I thank you for that. But I am going to disable the comments on YouTube for that reason, because I don't want, there's no way for me to moderate them on YouTube, and I just don't want people saying those nasty things. We live in a culture where women are blamed and shamed for coming forward, and I think we need to keep that in mind when we hear this story, why so many women haven't come forward. So let's start with you. What did you know about this whole scandal?
Well, I want to first say that when I go on radio shows or podcasts or videos, I usually say I'm honored to be on the show, happy to be on the show, and I'm really sad about being on today. That it's been heartbreaking what's been unfolding. And people have raised the question of whether I knew about the sexual harassment going on and whether I was complicit. And the truth is, I have known about problems for more than 10 years, But for a long time, I did not understand the significance or seriousness of the problems, and I failed to properly investigate. And I apologize for not recognizing these problems and stepping up much earlier. And all I can say is I did not understand. I thought he was a dotty old man who was kind of eccentric. I thought he was speaking in politically incorrect ways. And I believe that some women were overreacting.
It's a theme that I've heard over and over again from... I never thought that people were overreacting, but I hadn't heard that many stories. I only had my own experience and my friend. And it wasn't until I started investigating this over the last couple of months that I heard a lot more. But yeah, I hear that over and over from people that they say, dotty old man, and that women are overreacting.
Well, I believe Sally's explanation that she truly believed, still believes, I'm sure, that he's a gifted healer. She thought he was one of the great healers of the world. She thought the greatest legacy would actually not be the Weston A. Foundation, but a book she was planning to write on Jeffrey's healing techniques. And the way she was interpreting women reacting was that a lot of women have underlying sexual issues that are contributing to infertility issues and menstrual problems, menopausal symptoms, and that Jeffrey was only bringing up psychological issues that needed healing. He was only helping women, and that if he touched women as part of healing sessions, that was part of the treatment. And she convinced me that some women were not willing to address the underlying issues. And somehow I bought that. She was very convincing. And another thing, there was just a disconnect. My gut told me he's a dirty old man. He's a perverted old fool. But my brain was telling me that Sally was so brilliant. She had so much authority. She was so successful that she couldn't be wrong. She could not be in a relationship with somebody who was, as Jeffrey seemed and still seems. And so the only way I could reconcile that disconnect was to believe that he was a great healer, a great psychic, and maybe he was eccentric perhaps. But he was a great man.
Yeah.
And I convinced myself of that. But when stories continued, I started thinking, well, I do have to do something. I think he does not know how to talk to women correctly. And I attributed this to the fact that, well, back in 2005, he was about 80 years old. So, my father's generation. And I thought he talked in a sexist way, and if he could only be educated, the problem could be resolved.
Yeah.
And I also thought that he probably went back when he was in massage school or energy healing school, or don't know really how he trained. But back then, they probably did not coach people on the right way to talk to people who were, say, on a massage table. Now, I'd gone to Dr. J. Shearer's Academy of Natural Healing in Santa Fe back in the late 1980s, and I learned massage, and we learned things about the proper way to talk about what was going to happen. So we would talk about the healing benefits of massage, and among other things, we would talk about lymphatic drainage and how increasing circulation, say, in the breasts was very healing and a way to prevent breast cancer, for example. So it was a significant part of the healing work that in a massage that you would massage the breast area. But at the same time, very important to discuss this with the woman and ask her permission first. And so on with any sensitive or private areas of the body. So there's a way to discuss what's going to happen so there's no surprise, so people can relax, and to ask for permission. So I brought this up with Sally and with Jeffrey, and they decided that, yes, in fact, I could coach him and set aside time, and we talked. And he asked questions, and I thought he'd heard me, and I thought problem solved. From now on, he will know how to talk to women. People will not be upset. And what's more, his effectiveness will certainly be increased. So I thought problem was solved. And another thing, I really didn't think early on that he was acting inappropriately with women because he had not acted that way with me. And he'd had opportunities. Now, he had spoken to me in a way that was, well, let's say not politically correct, but it was not at conferences. It was in their home as a friend. And it always happened right in front of Sally. And I just didn't think that he was going further, say, at conferences or with other women. With me, it was always very borderline. I mean, he'd say something like, Kaayla, you really should have sex more often. And I'd say, Jeffrey, tell me something I don't know already.
Right.
You know, we kind of laugh about it, and Sally was there. And then he was giving me unasked for advice about how I should do my hair, how I could be more appealing to men, how I could dress better. And I should curl my hair. I think that was his advice. And I'm thinking, hey, you know, I don't think you're my image consultant, and I haven't asked for this advice.
Right.
And the creepiest thing that actually happened, and again, it was right in front of Sally, he said he'd like to have sex with me. But it was right in front of Sally, and I gave this no credence whatsoever.
How did he say that? How did that come up in conversation?
He was asking me about my sex life, whether I was dating, who I was seeing, and I think I was saying that at the time I hadn't met anyone that I was interested in being involved in that way with. And he said he wanted to have sex with me. And as I said, Sally was right there, and she's kind of laughing, and it didn't feel right, but, you know, he never followed through in any inappropriate way. So, you know, I let it go.
Yeah. You. That's weird, especially because this is your boss, really. Sally was effectively kind of like a boss, right? The president, you're the vice president, and they're talking about him having sex with, yeah, that's weird.
Well, this was before I was vice president, and at the time I might have been still on the honorary board, so this is back around 2005.
Okay.
So this was early on, and at that point I had not heard very many stories. I was not aware that, say, people had been on his massage table and had run screaming from the room and things we later heard. I was not aware of any of that at the time, and all I was seeing was a man who seemed a little eccentric and I thought politically incorrect, and I foolishly thought I could educate him. I thought I could help.
Right. So you talked about trying to help him learn about the ways that he should tell people before he touches them. Because sexual harassment, a lot of people don't know the definition of sexual harassment, but something as seemingly innocent as touching somebody without their permission can be construed as sexual harassment.
Yes, and I've been in massage school, and we were very, very carefully trained in the way you work with people. And many people, of course, have been violated in various ways in their lives, and it's extremely important to ask permission and to discuss what you're planning to do and why you're planning to do it.
Yeah.
And many massage techniques are very healing, but it's important that they be understood as something that you need to ask permission for, because if they're misunderstood, they would be sexual harassment or inappropriate.
You mentioned another thing that I made a note of when we spoke before the interview. Do you want to talk about the toys? The toys that in the car when you were in the car with...
Oh. Yeah, it wasn't just inappropriate to talk with me about my sex life. It was inappropriate all over. we're in the car, Sally was driving, and Jeffrey points down the street and he said, "That's where we buy our sex toys." And I mean, I was just floored. This was just totally inappropriate.
In every way possible. Every way possible. Okay. So, wow. Now, we're going to get into more. You've got still more to tell. How long has Sally, how long have they been together? Do you know? He's been around since the beginning. We think he was a co-founder of the organization, which I think was 99 or 2000.
Yes, I think he was back with her back in the Price Partner Nutrition Foundation days. And Sally at the time was married to John Fallon. And I'm not sure exactly when she married Jeffrey. I know at one point she, Jeffrey, and John Fallon were all living together in the same house.
I heard that.
And so not quite clear on the dates.
All right. Well, when did you start hearing more stories from other women that were being abused? Like you said, the stories of the women running, screaming from the tables and things like that.
Well, that was really quite recent. I had not heard those way back. The stories I heard way back were more along the lines of somewhat sexist talk and the kind of talk that you might expect with an unenlightened older person who needed to be educated about the proper way to speak to women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I somehow naively thought I could help him with that.
So you started hearing worse things. You said in my notes here, you heard complaints, and again, you said this is more recent, ranging from inappropriate touching to sexual molestation?
Yeah, well, as I said, more recently.
Yeah, yeah.
And, at the last conference in Indianapolis.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's what I heard too. We're probably thinking of the same. I don't know, maybe there are more, but I know there is one that I heard about from a number of different people that happened last year. So,
but a few years back, I'd started to become concerned with what I was hearing. You know, it wasn't adding up to what I had earlier thought. And I was concerned, and then he stopped coming to the conferences. So I thought Sally had addressed the problem, and he wasn't at the conferences. We didn't have to worry about it anymore.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned something that Sally said about uptight women. You want to share that?
Yes, she did feel that women who were protesting needed his healing touch the most, and that people were overreacting.
Okay. So he stopped coming to the conferences. I did hear that as well. We don't know what caused him to stop coming to the conferences for a number of years, do we?
I think there were some complaints, and I've since learned that actually there were quite a few complaints. And a few stories of women, jumping off the massage table, running out screaming. There were a number of stories, and quite know how to deal with this. And then he stopped coming to the conferences.
Okay, so there were a few years he wasn't there?
There were a few years, and I thought the problem had been solved. He'd stopped coming to the conferences.
Okay, and then you thought...
He was well into his 80s at that point. I mean, everybody thought the problem was going to die off, so to speak.
Right. Okay, so what did the board do? Did the board ever do anything about this, the board of directors?
When I joined the board of directors, no. But before then, back when, there were some complaints. And someone was removed. Well, actually, she resigned from the board. And she had put in a complaint. There'd been a letter, and people had requested that Jeffrey not come to the conferences. Now, I learned about this many years after it actually happened. And they had said that Jeffrey should not attend any conferences. And Sally would not have that. She wanted him with her. And women had gotten together to protest the sexually abusive nature of the interactions, with his healing treatments. And a board member was removed, she resigned back when.
Okay, yeah, heard about her. And then there was another one.
Yeah, another one. She left quietly, ostensibly for another reason, and just a very sad situation. She felt the foundation was doing so much good work, but she could not be a party to what she knew about Jeffrey's behavior.
There was one, and I did speak to this person, and we're not going to name any names because, again, these people don't want to come forward, and I get that. It's totally fine. But there was one who was threatened with legal action when she confronted this situation. The one in the different country that I'm talking about,
Oh, right. Yes, another chapter leader who'd been very, very active with the organization. And she had spoken up requesting that Jeffrey not be allowed to be involved when Sally was speaking and not be allowed with their members. And apparently Sally had reacted with, "Oh, no, not that again," kind of laughing in a nervous way. And then Sally went back to the States, cashed her check for the workshop, and then proceeded to take legal action against this person for other reasons, and just a very, very unfortunate situation.
Seems like, we're seeing a pattern here of women, not only this kind of condoning of, oh, he's just a dotty old man and that kind of thing, but there's also pretty intense action being taken toward women who do stand up.
Exactly. A lot of women have not stood up for that reason, and at the time I was not aware of the circumstances of that situation. I've been given another reason by Sally, and I did not have all the information about that at all.
Yeah.
And, now that I know the picture more completely, it's very, very sad, and there are many, many of those stories.
What about the author in London? I heard about this person too. I'm not familiar with he or she, the author in London.
Yeah, O.T. Ravenscoff, the author of The Cholesterol Myths, which Sally's publishing company, New Trends, had published. He had discussed with Sally the Jeffrey problem, and I'm hearing this secondhand, I was not there, requested that Jeffrey not attend or not be present at the workshops because of some misbehavior. And his book is no longer being published by Sally.
What about other board members and staff members? Did they know about this?
A lot of inappropriate suggestions about people's sex lives with staff members. Other board members, well, Dr. Mary Enig had called him Rasputin. And the reason she did that was, Rasputin in Russia, his relationship with the royal family, Nicholas II. And Rasputin was the mad monk, and he was known, among other things, for a lot of sexually inappropriate misbehavior. And Mary called him Rasputin because of his psychic power and his power over people. Mm-hmm. Rasputin had a whole lot of power over the royal family. And Mary and other people too have felt Jeffrey has this very strange power over Sally.
Hmm. Yeah, I heard some really disturbing things about not just sexual harassment, but a kind of spiritual, emotional thing that happened to a few different women.
A lot of power over, and many people have remarked on how Sally has a puppet board. The board of directors, they're Sally's puppets. Sally works the puppets as she pleases, but the Jeffrey in the Rasputin role manipulates the puppet Sally.
Mm. So you think he's really manipulating her?
It's possible. Dr. Marianne certainly thought that. That's something she had said to me. She called him Rasputin to many people. And Rasputin, of course, had a lot of psychic powers and a lot of things with the royal family and a lot of sexual misbehavior, shall we say.
And he couldn't be killed either. I know that about Rasputin.
Yeah, it was very hard to kill him. They shot him. They eventually drowned him. He was very hard to kill.
All right, let's talk about last year, because last year a bunch of stuff blew up. And we did hear from Annie Drew already. There's another victim who I haven't been able to get her to come forward, and she may not. That one was really serious. Very, very serious. And the reports that I heard from the people who were there on the scene, and these are people I know quite well, very good friends of mine, no reason to lie, were extremely disturbed, to the point that they're calling me and texting me frequently to say, are you going to be able to interview her? Are you going to be able to get this story? Because they were so upset by it.
Yes, this woman was apparently molested on the massage table in the guise of energy work that Jeffrey was supposedly doing as a healer, and had left in a state of extreme distress, was found in a fetal position, and someone trained to do emergency medical technician work had to help her. And this was one of the most alarming things I've heard about in a long time. There were many, many stories at that conference of people whom Jeffrey had said inappropriate things to, including me and another board member, Kim Schutte. And he had told both of us that we could improve our sex lives using certain techniques. And I want to be totally clear here. This was totally unsolicited behavior, him just coming up to us in a crowd, grabbing our wrists, saying he was tuning into our energy, and then explaining how we needed more sex and certain types of sex and how we can improve our sex. And totally, as I said, unsolicited.
You want to talk about what he said about masturbation?
Yeah, he said I should masturbate every day at 1 o'clock.
And when was it that he said that?
Right before the banquet.
Last year
In Indianapolis.
And what did you think when he said that, or how did you feel?
I couldn't believe that he would give that kind of advice. Certainly unsolicited advice, unwanted advice, totally inappropriate advice.
Was anybody with you when he said that?
Well, I was definitely in a crowd, but he was talking with me, so I'm not sure it was overheard. He said something similar to Kim Schutte, and again, Kim told me this. I did not overhear that.
But he said a similar kind of story.
Something similar, yeah. That was followed, as I understand it, at the banquet, because that's, Annie Drew had ended up sitting next to him at the banquet. So, within the course of an hour or so, there were multiple incidents.
So he was quite active last year, it sounds like.
A lot of people were complaining. I heard a lot of complaints last year. People shared a lot of stories. It was really alarming. And Sarah Pope, Kim Schutte, and I had talked a great deal about this at the conference and what we could do about it. And I had felt that Kim and Sarah needed to bring it up, and I said I would back them. I did not want to bring it up with Sally myself because I felt I was already on the outs with her.
Well,
there was a
because
big
it was last year that you were pushing this whole matter about the fermented cod liver oil testing.
Yeah, our relationship had been chilled ever since October when I'd first brought up my concerns about that product. Mm-hmm. And she had told me that I was stupid, there was unfounded fears, I could get straightened out by David Wetzel. And our relationship had shifted very quickly. Right. And because I had already, I didn't feel I was the right person to bring that up at the time. I did not feel Sally would be receptive to anything I was saying, and I was already seriously involved with the fermented cod liver oil issue at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I had requested that Sarah and Kim bring it up and said I would back them 100%.
And what did they say?
Well, they certainly understood it was a problem. It was not brought up, however, and as far as I know, it wasn't brought up. Maybe recently, since I've been thrown off the board, it has, because Jeffrey suddenly resigned and nobody had predicted that. And trust me, it's not because he's 89 years old that he resigned suddenly for a reason.
Well, it is interesting that he resigned right before Annie Drew's video went up, but I was telling people that we were going to shoot this video with Annie Drew, so it's possible that had something to do with it. So it was at last year's conference that you spoke to Kim Schutte, Sarah Pope, said, you'd like them to go forward, but then nothing happened. And then Kim Schutte, it was revealed by Annie Drew a couple days ago that because somebody confronted her online, and I hate this online when people say, oh, well, you didn't go to anybody, therefore it must not have happened, Yeah. Which is another way to blame the victim. But somebody said that she didn't go to, did you report it? And she said, yes, I did report it immediately to my chapter leader in San Diego, who was Kim Schutte, who at the time was on the board. Annie Drew said in a statement that she did go directly, right after it happened, to Kim Schutte. And she said she thought you were there when she went to Kim Schutte, and maybe you were. Were you there when she came to you and Kim Schutte?
I didn't hear anything about this. I only heard about Annie Drew's experience recently, when you talked to her and when the whole thing emerged, the last couple of weeks. So I was not aware that of the Annie Drew's experience at the conference. I was absolutely aware that there were multiple women reporting problems.
Okay.
Women. I'll just mention a woman who was recently married, where he, without any invitation on her part, had started telling her how they should be having sex, what positions they should be using, and other totally inappropriate comments.
Yeah. Did that to me too. And then, so Kim was told, according to Annie, Kim Schutte, who's now the new vice president, took your position, actually, last week, I guess it was announced. She was told that he had done this inappropriate behavior to Annie at the dinner. So it was literally at the end of the dinner or right after the dinner. And did Kim talk to you or anybody else about that, to your knowledge?
We weren't talking about what happened with Annie, or Annie's name was not given. Certainly Kim, Sarah, and I had talked about the problem that for several years Jeffrey had not come to the conferences. We had thought Sally had heard about the problems and decided to solve the problem by keeping him home. And then he came back, and he's scheduled to be at the conference this week.
This weekend, tomorrow.
Whether he does or not, I have no idea. I'm obviously out of the loop now. Right. But even after all that happened last year, including emergency medical assistance for a woman who was traumatized by him on the table, and dozens of incidences of him speaking inappropriately, he's back.
Yeah. And I did hear, just to put it out, I did hear that some of the incidents I heard, at least one of them was private, was in a private room, was not in public, which, they're both bad. They're both bad, but, that really concerns me as well. Okay, well, we're going to wrap this up. I mean, I think we've heard, you want to say anything else about your need to apologize to this community?
Yes, I feel like I should have known that that I knew part of the story years ago. I did not know all of the story. I had, in my own way, tried to solve some of the problems. I talked with Jeffrey years ago about how we are trained now in massage school about how to ask permission before touching if healing work is to go on.
Right.
And I thought he had listened to me when I discussed the appropriate ways to talk with women and the appropriate ways to work with women. And I had years ago thought he couldn't be wrong. I thought that Sally could not be married, or this may have been even before they did get married, involved with somebody who was inappropriately talking to and molesting women. It was just too hard to believe. I had to believe the myth that he was a gifted healer. And of course I had heard some stories to that effect.
What, so thank you, Kaayla. Thank you for saying that. I think it's hard for everyone involved, and I want to just acknowledge that you too are a victim. That inappropriate talk and that inappropriate behavior with him, grabbing your wrist and saying the things he said to you, that is sexual harassment. Clear as day, is according to the legal definition.
Well, I thought he was just, an older man who needed to be educated about the proper way to talk and ask permission the way people are trained in massage school today.
Yeah.
And because of what I had actually seen and experienced, he had never really gone over the line with me. A couple things seemed a little funny. But I'd been in their house. There were many opportunities where he could have, say, molested me, but he did not. And I just thought some people were overreacting. Mm-hmm. And I now realize that there's actually a long history of women being spoken to and touched inappropriately, and I did not know back then.
Yeah. My final question is really, is this all about Jeffrey? Is that the issue here, that there's a dotty old man? Or I don't think he's just a dotty old man. I personally think, based on all the information I've heard, which is quite a lot, and I'm sure you have too, that he's a sexual, that he is somebody who is sexually harassing people. I will say that. Is this all about him and his behavior? How do you see this plays into the organization of Weston Price Foundation?
Well, I can see now in retrospect that there has been a long-term pattern of covering certain things up. And one of those things was Jeffrey's behavior, and apparently there was inappropriate behavior going way back. And rather than address the inappropriate behavior, people were removed as board members, people were removed as chapter leaders. It was anybody who spoke up, it was off with the head.
Yeah. Okay, not a fun interview to do, but important. And the reason we're doing this is not, I've heard people say, why do you have a vendetta? Which is insulting and obnoxious, quite honestly, I think, because they've said that to me as well. But
well, I could speak up now because my head has already been offed, so I'm speaking up now. There is a long-term pattern, and I did not believe it initially. Sally was my friend, and it just seemed hard to believe that she could be married to somebody who was not a powerful healer, that was perhaps just a perv. And, it was very hard for me to accept and believe way back then. And I had not witnessed anything myself that was anything more than perhaps a little politically incorrect. And I very naively thought that if I spoke up and spoke to him and tried to help him understand how people are trained to do their healing work now in massage school, that I'd done my duty.
Yeah.
And for a little while there, the complaints stopped, and then they started up again, but he stopped coming to the conferences. So I thought, okay, the problem has been solved. The problem has been addressed.
I wonder if the year he came back to the conference was the year that I went, I think it was, because I don't know if he was there the years before, but it was 2011 that I was harassed in Dallas, and a friend of mine also was, so might have been the years before that he wasn't around.
Yeah, he was gone for a couple of years, and I'm not clear when. I mean, I've been going to so many conferences, and they sort of blur together.
Yeah, sure, it's hard to remember. Well, thank you, Kaayla, and I just want to thank you on behalf of all the women out there who have been harassed, and, it's the people who are willing to speak out about it, which takes bravery, that can enable others to speak out about it. And even if they can't speak out about it publicly like we're doing, knowing that they're not the only one, I think makes a huge difference for people to know that it's not normal, it's not okay, and it is harassment. And, and you weren't the only one. If you're out there and you're watching this, you weren't the only one. And thank you for your apology. Thank you for your concern for this community, and I just really want to say how much I appreciate everything you've done to stand up. It takes a lot of courage to do what you've done for this community.
Thank you.
Thank you.